Poverty and socioeconomic status impacts early language development, school readiness, as well as the early identification and intervention for neurodevelopmental disorders like autism spectrum disorder. Today, I am speaking with Daniel Mendoza and Marcos Aguilar. Daniel is the clinical director for the Special Needs Network Applied Behavior Analysis Program, and Marcos is the assistant director of clinical services and intervention. We are going to talk about how nonprofit grassroots organizations like the Special Needs Network in Los Angeles, California, are responding to the special education crisis and supporting families in underserved communities.
Millions of kids struggle with learning, processing, and social emotional difficulties. These challenges interfere with their ability to reach their full potential. Dr. Karen Wilson is here to help. Her extensive background in pediatric neuropsychology and higher education have prepared her for this unique mission. Listen as she delivers content to inform, educate, and empower parents and educators. This will enable you to identify challenges that kids face and get them on the road to achieving their full potential. This is Diverse Thinking, Different Learning by Child Nexus.
Daniel and Marcos, welcome to the podcast.
Thanks for having us.
I'm so thrilled to have you both. You know, a while back, probably right in the beginning of the pandemic, I gave a talk for parents in the Special Needs Network community. And at that time, parents were struggling with trying to support their kids who had transitioned to remote learning. And I just was really impressed with how the Special Needs Network kind of jumped to support the parents at a time when there was great need for support.
Yeah, it was a very tough time for parents. It was a really quick change going from dropping off your kid and being able to do everything you have to do throughout the day to being at home all day long with your kid and having to manage their education and at the same time manage your work. It's like you all of a sudden you doubled the work. And if you have more than one child, you tripled it, or quadrupled it. And then if you have a child, diagnosed with autism, you possibly, the amount that a parent is responsible is so much more. So it's a lot. Yeah.
Absolutely. And I know for many, this is an introduction to the Special Needs Network. And so we're going to put information about your organization in the show notes, but I would love for you, either one of you, to talk about the Special Needs Network. Tell our listeners who may not know about it.
So briefly, because I could go on and on about it. Right?
I know you could.
Special Needs Network started in 2005 by Ariva Martin. And it started as a result of her journey through accessing services for her child diagnosed with autism, Marty. Through that process, she realized the amount of hoops and like barriers and things that she had to go through to be able to access services. Through that process, she became acquainted with a group of parents that were that were also located like in South LA. So through that process, as a result of being acclimated with these parents, that she realized that a lot of parents are going through a lot of issues. Given that she was highly educated and was a business owner at that time, very well off with regard to being able to traverse systems. Given that she's a lawyer. She observed other people not necessarily being able to do that. So that's essentially where it was born from, realizing that there was a gap in access of services and wanting to minimize the issues that are experienced by communities of color. So that's essentially a brief of how Special Needs Network started.
Yes. And, I reached out to Ariva because the school year is winding down. And I know I spoke to you both as well. And I just don't want discussions about inequity in education to fizzle out, because it seems like there's been an increased awareness about the inequities that are there in our education system, and particularly the special education system. And I think the inequities have always existed, but over the past year, COVID has really kind of lifted the veil and revealed inequities for those who may not have been aware of them before. Obviously, you all have been aware of those inequities, but now other people are seeing it too. And we've seen that underrepresented and marginalized communities have been disproportionately impacted by the COVID-19 pandemic. And you were well positioned to address those needs and those inequities because you were already doing the work.
Yeah. Yeah, you're absolutely right. I think through the boots on the ground effort, through being connected to a whole host of families, with regard to a whole variety of services that are provided by Special Needs Network, our back to school program, our summer program that is Camp JPAC, our parent advocacy and mentoring program. All these programs keep parents engaged. Additionally, Ariva's show that kind of deals with inequities across the board for underserved communities. Those are all places of connection. And where Marcos and I specifically come in is that we run the ABA program. And as a result of running the ABA program, we saw firsthand how things changed and the depth of need that families had and how they were impacted when COVID started. But additionally, specifically what the families went through themselves during the process of going from in school to in home and what those inequities kind of like looked at. I think Marcos can talk a little bit about some of the inequities that he's observed.
There was a big concern in the beginning, right? When we were first hit with the pandemic. And I definitely got to thank our clinical team for jumping on board and getting telehealth services started for a lot of the families that were otherwise going to have a gap in services, right? If there was a gap in services and access to care during the time of this switch, we possibly would have encountered a lot more difficulty, right, in getting services started again. But thanks to the clinical team that we were able to get started quickly. Right. And be able to provide support for the families that otherwise would have been really struggling with providing access to services to their children while they were having educational services or otherwise that required services in home or via telehealth.
Right. And so tell me about the ABA program. You mentioned it.
Yeah, so we provide ABA services, applied behavior analysis, therapy to children diagnosed with autism. These services are considered to be medically necessary, and it looks to be the main therapy that mitigates maladaptive behavior, like minimizes maladaptive behavior. It also increases adaptive behavior in individuals diagnosed with autism. Now, ABA therapy works for everyone, essentially. ABA is a science, and it can be applied to essentially groups, in school, in organizations, a lot of different areas, right? Specifically with children with autism, what we work on is increasing language and decreasing maladaptive behavior. As a result of children not necessarily having the available language to them, given autism being a barrier and then not necessarily being able to access the environment at the same level, they don't develop. The trajectory of development is not the same, is not equal to your neurotypical child, right? So the goal with ABA therapy is to be able to develop those skill sets, language, receptive and expressive. And as a result of developing that language, then you're essentially decreasing the probability, the likelihood of maladaptive behavior. Some of the maladaptive behavior that we see is aggression, self-injurious behavior, self-stimulatory behavior. Some of these behaviors that can get in the way of accessing environments and having a richness of life more so than anything, and be able to be independent in life. And that's really what ABA works on. Which is, it's funny because it's like basically everything that a human being does. Mm-hmm. So it's interesting, it's fun, and it can be very complicated at times.
And to add on to what Daniel mentioned, oftentimes we do see our participants or our children engage in behaviors because they want to communicate their level of need, right? And what we do in essence is we come into the home and we observe those behaviors and collect initial data to be able to understand the functions of those behaviors and to be able to program and collaboratively with their family to replace those maladaptive behaviors, right? By increasing their level of communication.
And that collaboration is really key. And you know, when you're talking about the ABA services, even though you're seeing this improvement in behavior and you're seeing an improvement in language skills, what you're also talking about is rewiring of the brain and changes in the brain, which has led to those improvements that you're seeing. And, you know, you both were talking about autism, and we know that in the United States, about 1 in every 54 children has autism. And I think one of the things that you have all said in your organization is that nowhere is autism's impact felt more than in underserved communities. And when you're talking about ABA, I'm thinking about when there's a delay in the onset of treatment, because for some underserved communities, that delay can be as much as 2 years. And that's 2 years of not getting the intervention that can make a significant impact on a child's life. Can you speak a little bit about that?
Yeah. So what you're speaking to is layers and layers and layers of like systemic issues when it comes to individuals of Black, Indigenous, and people of color, like our BIPOC backgrounds. We tend to experience poverty at relatively higher rates, and we live in areas where educational systems aren't necessarily as well built, or medical systems aren't as well built as they should be. So yes, definitely. Additionally, parents don't necessarily have all the education on hand to be able to identify when their child is not necessarily developing in a way that their typical counterparts would. So as a result, they may delay a little bit in accessing services, and then even when they do seek some help from a professional, sometimes their concerns aren't taken as serious as possible. And the other thing that we've seen with that is not only are their concerns not taken as serious as possible, at some point, like, parents may give up for a period of time, and during that time, that issue may be exacerbated. It'll get worse. As compared to other communities where, like, let's say you get your first opinion, you might go get a second opinion. And that second opinion might disagree with the first opinion. So you might, go get a third opinion. And then, you got 2 out of 3, and you in all likelihood, you're going to move forward with regard to like some sort of psychological assessment to figure out where, what exactly is going on. So that's what we have seen. Additionally, we've seen there's kids that we get that are clearly on the spectrum and should have been diagnosed, but aren't getting diagnosed at 7, 8, 9, 10. There was one family that we provided treatment. Yeah, we provided treatment to was receiving services at 18. So just as a result of lack of understanding, lack of education, and also not even knowing that the system provides access to ABA therapy and it's covered.
And lack of support as well, right? There's definitely there has to be some level of responsibility taken by the other professionals and educators that have been in this child's life, right? And for there not to be support for this child, right? Or some form of communication with the family and saying, hey, this child can definitely benefit from these types of services, right? What happened during those 16, 18 years, right? Of no level of support being provided for this family. And you have to think, is there something wrong with the system, right? Is there something wrong with our medical system? Is there something wrong with our educational system?
Yeah, I mean, that just really speaks to, opportunities to really reach families early on when they're seeing their children struggle. And we've talked a lot on this podcast about the importance of early intervention. And, I've spoken to families who've crossed state lines to get their kids the support that they need because they know that there's a greater access to services for autism in some school districts versus others. And it seems there should be equity in terms of access to resources and access to information that can help you make informed decisions.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. The systems, given that we're just advancing our knowledge with regard to autism. I mean, the autism mandates didn't begin, like in California specifically, till 2011. We're really late to the game. The game changing study by Lovas that really provided support for individuals with autism to be able to really experience a difference in life as a result of intervention was 1987. So we're talking about what it's like 30 years ago, 35 years ago, where some of this technology was not necessarily developed, but it was put into the journals, and we were able to see that individuals can really have a difference within their like IQ scores and stuff. So we're still in the development stages, and what we see is really for it to get to some underserved communities or the majority of underserved communities, it does take a lot more time. And like I said, it takes a lot more kind of fighting. So people in underserved communities, as a result of the layers and layers and layers of like systemic oppression that are experienced, are not don't necessarily prioritize all the time to be able to get access to care for their kids. And that's kind of across the board with regard to any medical care. You see differences in access of medical care with regard to any level of medical care in communities that are underserved compared to other communities.
Yeah. And, we've been talking about autism, but it's not, we see this in other developmental disorders as well, and mental health challenges. Poverty, for example, impacts early language development, which leads to problems with reading. And we know that children with unresolved language impairments by second and fourth grade are at much greater risk for reading disorders. And we know that there's also the education to prison pipeline for students with disabilities. And so like you're saying, there are a lot of layers that we need to, I guess, first acknowledge that exist and then work on a solution to addressing these issues. It just seems like such a big problem.
Yeah. And to be able to deal with it, you almost have to deal with the entirety of once, which is,
and it can feel overwhelming. It can feel overwhelming. Like, where do you even start? But it really takes organizations like the Special Needs Network to begin the work and to continue the work.
Right. And it's funny that you mentioned that, because it's the structure that the way that Special Needs Network approaches things is on two different levels: the boots on the ground and access to services. So you're on a day-to-day basis, you're talking to families, you're kind of guiding them, you're providing them the tools of access. With regard, in the summer, we have our summer program. Throughout the year, we have our ABA program. But then in addition to that, there is a whole PR approach that is taken, where you're constantly talking about the issues that are experienced by the communities, where it gets the message out there. And then on a state level or a legislator level, you're consistently aware of legislation that is impacting the community, and you're either supporting or kind of advocating for changes in certain areas as a result.
Yeah. And I'm thinking about, how do we reach families and provide this information to them so that they get it early? And it sounds like you're doing some of that. When you talk about your boots on the ground, can you tell me a little bit about what you mean by that and what that looks like?
So the way the boots on the ground, the way it looks is as a result of creating programming, right? So one of the programs that we have is Camp JPAC. Camp JPAC, what it does is it's a summer program, and it's a fully free program. Kids come over the summer and on a day-to-day basis, it's a summer camp, and you have like enrichment activities, et cetera, right? As a result of the program being free, it attracts a whole lot of people that wouldn't otherwise be attracted to the program, right? So that's one way.
And it's fully inclusive too, our Camp JPAC program.
Yeah, and other ways is, for example, our PAM program, Parent Advocacy and Mentoring. You're educating families. So as you're educating families in cohorts, maybe like 10, 12 at a time. And this program has been happening since over 10 years. And you're educating 10 families, but those families are in contact with like 3 or 4 other families, right? So every time you educate 10, you have 3 or 4 more that are then communicated with, and in the future are more than likely to be part of this program. Additionally, we have our back to school program, our back to school event. This back to school event, what it provides is supplies for families that are underserved, backpacks, pencils, all types of stuff, food. And during that process, as you're attracting people with resources, you're also providing them resources with regard to their kids. So like, let's say you have, 5,000 families attend, there's a portion of that naturally may have some predisposition or may be on the spectrum or something. So just by being in an area where they're getting more information or more knowledge with regard to the topic of autism, that in itself kind of increases the likelihood of them touching bases. Also partnerships with other organizations. We partner with St. John's Well Child and Family Center. They're in FHQC in South LA. They have somewhere upwards of like 15 clinics, something to that extent. So every child is going to see a pediatrician. So when they see a pediatrician, if there are some considerations to make, and there's some testing done, they might, refer that child to their behavioral health department. Their behavioral health department will then refer them to us, to Special Needs Network, to then further kind of figure out if the child needs services. But the behavioral health department, in essence, what they do is if the child is diagnosed, then they'll send them over to us. If the child's not diagnosed and there's some suspicions, they will complete a psychological evaluation, and as a result, either send them over to us, or maybe send them over to a different kind of therapy if like, let's say they're not on the spectrum. So all these different modalities where you have access points and resources, you're creating an infrastructure, like roads to a city where there are all these resources, and that city that's very well developed has flying cars and all kinds of stuff, especially.
We're providing roads.
But I love that idea. Those entry points are so important, and the pediatrician is a big one because all parents are taking kids to their pediatrician at least once a year for their annual checkup, and multiple times leading up to that first birthday. And so that's an important one. And then are you also partnering with education institutions? Because a lot of these kids are entering preschools and entering kindergarten classrooms, and they may have been missed by their pediatrician, or may not have had, regular visits to their pediatrician, but they're definitely struggling with learning, with social interactions, with behaviors. Are you also partnering with education systems as well? Because it seems like that would be another great entry point.
Yeah, we're actually partnering with LAUSD in the new clinic that's in the process of being completed at the MLK Medical Center. We'll have a partnership with LAUSD, and then we'll have a referral system and process where individuals in the educational system will be able to access, and that'll be another entry point where they'll see a psychologist, and if the psychologist feels that the requirements are met, then they'll refer them over to us for us to then provide some level of services to them. So yeah, you're absolutely right that that multitude of entry points, educational entry point, is very important. And it's just to add to that, in the Well Child Center, which is our clinic, what we will also be doing is we're partnering with DCFS to create an entry point there. We're in conversations with some of the medical directors that have considerations where a child might be under the guard of DCFS, and a proportion of those kids may be on the spectrum, and they may not have had access to services in the past. So as a result of kind of making that touch point with the system, then you create that inroad also. And before that child is reunited with their family, you're essentially, what you're doing is making sure that they have access to services, again, to minimize the later issues that arise as a result of not necessarily having fair access to education and medical services.
Right. And I mean, that is it's a comprehensive approach. And I think that's what I love about your network and your approach, is that you have, again, these multiple entry points, and then you have multiple ways of supporting families. And you talked about your Well Child Center, and then also the support for parents, because having a child who struggles with learning, who is on the spectrum, can be very isolating for parents. And we know that in marginalized communities, there can be stigma associated with having a child with special needs. And it seems that parent support that you provide is really helpful in helping parents feel less isolated, but also reducing the stigma.
There's a level of misunderstanding sometimes, right? When you go into the homes, it isn't about the clinical team creating everything for the family, right? It isn't. Yes, we have our systems of evaluating, of collecting data, right? Of collecting information on the behaviors that we observe. but there's also a level of collaboration that's very important, right? And hearing what these specific needs are for those families, right? What is their objectives, right? What are the goals here? Where do we want this child to be, right? Where do they want this child to be? What do they want them to be able to access, right? And I do believe that there's a misunderstanding from a lot of clinical teams at times where we go in and we just want to fix everything, right? But it is really important to discuss those issues or concerns with families to get an understanding of what their level of need is and to be able to coordinate a level of support, right? And a level of collaborative unit that's able to work together in working towards those objectives, right? And among that, we're able to create a very cohesive unit that's able to work together and work on these objectives together as well.
And it really is that collaboration that's so important. You know, one of the things that I've learned from doing clinical work is that when I have a family and we're working with that family on addressing the needs of their child, it really does take a collaborative approach to get the best outcomes. When you are having conversations with teachers and you're communicating with pediatricians about what your findings were, and you're hooking them up with occupational therapy services or speech and language therapy services, and everybody is communicating and collaborating to have the best outcome for this child. That's when you have the biggest impact, and that's where you see the most growth.
Yes, and that's the thing too, is that it is a team effort, right? It isn't just ABA and family. It's ABA, family, speech pathologists, occupational therapists, physical therapists, and it's that collaborative measure. When we all come together and work on those goals as a unit, that's when you see the child take off. Right. And it's also inquiring with family and asking them, how's everything going? Right. How was the weekend? How was his day at school today? Right. Because what we may be working on, say Monday, we may not want to work on Wednesday because it was an irritable day for the child. Right. And we definitely want their motivation to be high during session, because that's how we get, a level of responsiveness from the child and a level of responsiveness from the family as well. And oftentimes it is just checking in. It is discussing what the goals are, right? If parents wants to work on this goal, but we're here, right? We have to communicate that over to families, right? And let them know that this is where we're at right now. We're going to work on these prerequisite skills before we start to target the objectives that you may have. Right. But we have to be able to communicate with the family so that they have an understanding of where we're at, of what the goals are and what we're working on. Right. What I tell families when I first meet them, Dr. Wilson, is I don't want to be the best to work with your child. I want to be able to figure out how we can access working with your child so that I can then provide you with the tools to be able to get your child to generalize these skills outside of our sessions. Right. If the child is responding great during a session, that's great. Right. But are they generalizing outside of sessions? Right. That's the important part.
And that's really key. And, as you're talking about the support that you're providing to parents, and I'm thinking about, your programs that really support other parents and having parents come together with each other, I see that as another entry point. When parents are able to share their experience with your network, and they may have a friend, a colleague, of another relative who has a child who's struggling, they can then say, my child was also struggling, and I was able to get him help that made a significant difference in his life. And then they make the connection to your organization or another organization that helps that child get support as well. So word of mouth is another entry point for so many families, particularly in some communities.
You'd be amazed at how small our world is, right? And yes, that network happens all the time, right? I get calls from, hey, I received your phone number from X and Y's parent. They mentioned how wonderful of a team you guys have, and we want to inquire how we go about receiving services from you guys, right? So yes, definitely.
And to the point of parents connecting, I think that's one of we consider it to be not just one, but the most important area to address, just because parents are the ones that manage the lives of the children. They manage the environment. A lot of the time, a lot of things that we do is implement changes within the environment, and parents have to be on board with that. And we have to find ways to connect with parents to make sure that they are able to be on board with some of the intervention changes or prescriptions that we make, and that family connection is vital. And now, for us as practitioners and clinicians to express these things to families, there's a value in that, right? However, if you have another family expressing it to a family, the value is probably exponential. It's like exponentially beyond whatever we could ever provide, just because the family's is been through it, and the amount of impact that a family receives as a result of having a child diagnosed with autism and being able to, and having to support them is so far from beyond our understanding, or far beyond the understanding of a person that has a neurotypical child, where it's something where a parent lives with the child every single day, and appropriate expectations must be had, and that connection from parent to parent is just pivotal, because it's someone gets me. Someone gets what I'm going through. Someone's been through this before, and they're giving me the advice, of how to get through it. It's almost like being like a great basketball player, right? Like when you're a great basketball player and you have a great basketball player coach, like that coach, you can have some level of trust with regard to that coach, and well, that person's been here before. They have a certain level of education with regard to basketball. They have a certain amount of rings or whatever. They've been there, done that. So I'm going to take that advice differently than someone that is not necessarily in that area. So it's that difference that is really pivotal to implementing services and successful intervention to parents.
And that parent mentoring, again, kind of addresses that issue of stigma. It addresses the issue of feeling isolated. And it lets you, again, like you're saying, feel like you're not alone, and you're getting guidance from someone who's actually walked in your shoes. And that's really powerful from so many parents. And it also can instill some hope, because that someone else has been through what I've been through, and their child has seen improvements. And there's an opportunity for my child to experience the same with the appropriate intervention.
Yeah, and an added layer to this, and an added layer / intersection, like there's so many words for it, right? Is society, right? And how is society built, and what's society's approach to disability? In disability studies and the medical field, there's a difference with regard to the approach to developmental disabilities. There's the medical model of developmental disabilities, and then there's the social model of developmental disabilities. The medical model of developmental disabilities / autism, what it tells us is that individuals don't necessarily have all of the adaptive behavior, and then we have to fix it, right? Okay, that's one way to look at it. The other way to look at it is through the social model of developmental disabilities, is that society doesn't necessarily have all the entry points for individuals to be able to coexist in society and live in society and have, a quote unquote, independent, relatively functional life. And the reason I'm bringing that up is, as a result of the environment, society not being as inviting as it should be, then you have parents living under circumstances where they don't necessarily have places to take their kids, the movie theater, restaurants, just going out to regular things where, if your child is not necessarily behaving in the quote unquote appropriate way, people are going to, look at you a certain way. And it's as a result of the way society looks at developmental disabilities itself. So not only are you experiencing all this, first you have to access it, right? And once you do access it, your child, is over time going to improve in their language skills and decrease their maladaptive behavior. But even through that process, what also kind of creates an issue is existing within that society that doesn't necessarily accept people with developmental disabilities and tends to want to fix them, so that's a whole nother issue. So
that's a whole other, we can have a whole other podcast episode on that.
And so being able to connect with families, that's okay, there's an accepting, a level of acceptance there where, parents are home. You see what I'm saying? It kind of counteracts part of what society does to them inadvertently or advertently, I guess you could also say.
Yeah. And really what you're speaking to is the idea that there needs to be societal change. There's been a lot of talk over the past year about the fact that we need to change our education systems so that they're more inclusive. And you're talking about bigger changes to society as well.
I've worked in a lot of schools too, where they're secluded, right? A lot of our children are secluded. They're in one area. Meanwhile, the majority of the classrooms are all in one area, right? So there is some form of seclusion going on. And it isn't a full inclusive system, so that when our children do go out into society, whether it's to the grocery store or whether there's all these misunderstandings of, a level of responsiveness, of how people respond to behaviors when they do occur in a natural environment, right? And there's this level of misunderstanding, and rightfully so, because there's these systems that seclude everything, right? That don't include what society really is.
Yeah. And, we've been talking, and we know that it can be really devastating for vulnerable kids to not get access to early intervention, early diagnosis, and benefit from a lot of the services that they need in order to thrive, like the ABA services that you both provide. But I think I'm hopeful, and I am hopeful, because there are grassroots organizations like yours that are responding to the difficulties that we are facing in society, the crises, some would say, with respect to developmental disorders, particularly in underserved communities. And I'm just thrilled that you're doing the work that you're doing. And I think that there is a need for your organizations like Special Needs Network to have a bigger presence across the country, probably across the globe, because it's not just here in the United States. It's in a lot of other places on Earth where we're seeing these disparities and these difficulties and people having difficult time accessing resources. And I think it really takes a collaborative effort for organizations to come together to support families in general. And I'm just grateful for the work that you're doing.
Thank you.
Thank you. We're real happy to support families, to support the community, and do, our percentage of work or our level of work to kind of be able to make some adjustments and level the playing field, and make things more equitable for families and children, and and adults diagnosed or experiencing autism or that identify as autistic. Everybody needs to be considered in the equation, and these systems must exist for humanity to be respected. It's very basic, right? Like if you approach things from a humane perspective, then you're going to figure out how to make sure every human being has access to services and all of this stuff. So we're very happy to do it.
Wonderful. And I don't know when this episode is going to air yet, but we are actually sponsoring a social justice town hall about inequities in education and mental health. And I'm going to send you an invitation to it, because I think I'd love to continue this conversation and have more people involved, because I think that, again, when we work together, we can really make a big impact and have change.
Awesome. We'd love to talk about it, but we all, at town halls and everywhere else, but we also like to do a lot of stuff. So,
and that's it. That's why I want you to be there, so you can talk to people about how to go from just talking about something to action, because I think that's where the emphasis needs to be. It's right. In now that because we know what we need to do. It's like, but how do we make these things happen? What can we do? And I think that's, you all are doing the work. So tell me about when the Center for Autism and Developmental Disabilities is going to open. Do you know?
So it's kind of the opening time has gotten pushed around. It's gotten a little complicated just because of COVID and all. But right now we're looking at this December.
Oh, wow.
Looking at this December to have ABA, speech, occupational therapy, earlier intervention, a connection with LAUSD, all in South LA. And all of that is a statement as far as like where the center is located, because it's basically saying, hey, look, in the children with autism and the families with autism need support, and we're here in South LA. And just by the essence of having a building there, and it's a big building, you're saying this is important. And not only that, families are, as a result of it being in their environment, they become more aware and cognizant of it, right? Like it's there, like you can't miss it as you drive by. Oh, that's the new autism center. Oh, okay. Have you heard about the new autism center being built on the street? And then that whole community, it radiates within that community. So that's why I'm saying it's a statement, because you're putting it there, you're making the statement, and then you're creating, a fuss about it, which is great.
Absolutely. It is an absolute statement. And I'm thrilled. And I hope I get an invitation when you all open your doors.
Definitely will.
Definitely.
So I know that families are probably going to want to get in touch with you to know more information about, your summer program, your parent support services, and what is the best way for them to get in touch with you or to know more about the Special Needs Network?
Two ways. They can look at our website, SNNLA at specialneeds.org, SNNLA.org, SNNLA.org. Sorry, I don't say that often. And or you could email info@specialneedsnetwork.org.
Perfect. And I will make sure that I put all of that information in the show notes. Thank you both so much for coming on the podcast. And again, I appreciate all the work that you're doing and look forward to partnering with you in the future.
Thanks for having us.
Great. Thank you for having us.
I absolutely love the work that the Special Needs Network has been doing to engage communities, and they have been doing this for a number of years. I would love to see more collaborations across the United States and the world, frankly, collaborations that work to address the needs of families who have children with unique or special needs. Be sure to check out the great work that the Special Needs Network is doing. Their information can be found in the show notes. I hope that you enjoyed this conversation and that it inspired you in the same way that it has inspired me. Enjoy the rest of your day.
Thanks for listening to Diverse Thinking, Different Learning by Child Nexus. For more resources, visit us online at childnexus.com.